All right, let's get right into it. There was this huge study. I mean, it spanned 4 decades and looked at 22 different wealthy nations. And what it found, well, it's genuinely shocking. It's all about who's dying and why, and it really puts the United States under a microscope. So here's the headline, the big takeaway. If you're an American between 25 and 44, you are more than 2.5 times as likely to die as someone your age in, say, Canada, Germany, or Australia. I mean, think about that. It's such a huge difference that some researchers are actually calling it a mass extinction event for young Americans. No. So, of course, that begs the big question, right? What on earth is killing young Americans? And that's exactly what we're going to dig into. Now, the bad news is there's no easy single answer here. It's more like this tangled web of problems all connected. But we're going to try and pull those threads apart one by one. And to really start to get a handle on this, we don't even have to look at other countries yet. Some of the most revealing, most startling data, it's right here at home. Just take a look at this. You've got Summit County, Colorado. It's one of the wealthiest places in the country. Life expectancy there, almost 87 years. Incredible. But then you go just a few states over to Oglala County in South Dakota, and that number just plummets, all the way down to less than 67. That is a 20-year gap inside the same country. And if that 20-year gap doesn't sound crazy enough, let's put it in perspective. The life expectancy gap inside the U.S. is actually bigger than the gap between the entire United States and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. We're talking about a country where people are still, to this day, dying from the Black Plague. That just shows you how deep this crisis runs right here. Okay, so when you hear stats like that, what's the first thing you think of? For a lot of people, it's our healthcare system, right? The lack of universal coverage. And look, that's definitely part of the puzzle. But it is not the whole story, not even close. See, here's the thing. In the US, by law, emergency rooms have to give you stabilizing treatment. Doesn't matter if you can pay or not. Now, you might walk out with a mountain of debt for sure, but they will save your life in that moment. So the real mystery here isn't about a lack of emergency care. The real question is, why are so many more young Americans ending up in the ER to begin with? And that question, well, it leads us straight to our first major suspect in this whole mess, the massive, growing gap of economic inequality. You can actually see how it all went wrong on this timeline. Before about 1985, believe it or not, America was actually a safer place to live than similar countries. We had what's called a mortality advantage. But then the 80s hit, and things started to shift. Union power started to fade, other countries caught up to us medically, and then, as inequality in the US just took off, we started falling behind. And we've been falling behind ever since. This widening gap created something researchers now call diseases of despair. And that's not just some poetic phrase, it's a real clinical term. It covers deaths from things like liver disease, drug overdoses, even reckless behaviors. And they're all tied back to this feeling of hopelessness, the feeling you get when you just don't see a path forward. And it's not just about how much money you have in the bank. Some groundbreaking research called the Whitehall Studies looked at British government workers and found something amazing. It turned out that a person's rank, their position in the hierarchy, their sense of control over their own work had a direct physical impact on their health. And the culprit? Good old chronic stress. And the price of that stress is just staggering. Being lower on that ladder, having less of a say, it led to higher cortisol levels, that's the stress hormone, and more heart disease. The bottom line? Their life expectancy was a full 10 years shorter than their bosses. And get this, these were all people with stable, secure government jobs. Just imagine what that gap looks like in today's much more precarious economy. Which brings us to culprit number 2. Because it's not just the stress from being on the wrong side of inequality. It's the fact that in America, when you stumble, there's often no safety net there to catch you. I mean, this little rundown here pretty much nails the economic whiplash that has defined the millennial experience, right? The rules are always changing, the goalposts are constantly moving, and that feeling of solid financial security, it just feels like it's always just out of reach. It creates this constant humming anxiety in the background of everything. Now, don't get me wrong, other countries have their own economic issues. Youth unemployment in parts of Europe has been awful. But here's the key difference. It's the consequences. In the US, losing your job can mean you're financially ruined, like overnight. Because we don't have those strong social safety nets, one bad week, you get laid off, you get a surprise medical bill, that can spiral into a total catastrophe. All right, our third culprit. This one is something millions of us do every single day, probably without even thinking about it. We get in our cars. The numbers here are pretty brutal. The US has the highest rate of deaths from car crashes and the highest rate of pedestrian deaths compared to similar countries. But here's the weird part. It's not because we're worse drivers. On a per-mile basis, we're actually pretty average. The problem is, we just drive so much more than anyone else. And all those extra miles add up to more than double the average number of deaths. And this is where it all starts to tie back together. Of course, the most obvious danger of a car is getting in a wreck. But for a lot of young people, the truly deadly part of their car might just be the loan. In a country where you have to have a car to get around, that car payment can be one of the biggest financial stressors there is, just constantly pushing people closer and closer to the financial edge. Okay, so we've laid out our three main suspects in this investigation. Now, let's connect the dots and see how they all work together to create this crisis that seems to be uniquely American.
So, here's the final verdict. It's not just one of these things. It's the toxic combination of all three. You have deep inequality, which creates this chronic stress that literally shortens your life. Then you have no real safety net, so any little problem can turn into a financial black hole. And on top of all that, a reliance on cars adds both a direct physical risk and another layer of crushing financial pressure. They don't just exist side by side, they feed on each other.
And that leaves us with one last, pretty chilling thought to consider. Millennials are just the first generation where these trends have been going on long enough to show up so clearly in the death statistics. So if these big, systemic problems don't get fixed, the question isn't if this is going to continue. The real question is, who's the next generation to show up in the data?